As a first-time voter, if you're anything like me, you might be feeling overwhelmed and lost about where to even start engaging with complex issues like inequality. So, I've called upon Dr. Ng Kok Hoe, who does research on minimum income standards in Singapore, to break down what we should know about inequality, how it affects all of us, and what we can do about it beyond this general elections.
Hi, my name is Kok Hoe. My research in the last few years has focused on two main areas: income security, especially for older people, and then housing. So the most direct way of understanding inequality is that it is an uneven distribution of resources and opportunities across society. A key feature of inequality that we need to remember is that it is not a naturally occurring thing. Right? Much like the climate crisis, it results directly from human action and inaction. We sometimes end up framing the issue of inequality as a narrow issue of poverty. But when we look at inequality, it's important to think about what that means for everyone. In our study, we convened a series of focus groups. So yes, material circumstances quite different, but their aspirations for their children are very similar. We noticed that even for participants who maybe find it a bit harder, right? There are things they wouldn't compromise on, right? Things like celebrations for their children's birthdays. Sometimes we hear that sort of judgment, right? That people should have a certain way of prioritizing their spending. And we might say, why are you spending on a birthday celebration instead of food? But if we listen to the way people relate to these things, we then see that it occupies a very special place in their daily lives, because these are the things they can provide for their children. So they will do everything they can to secure it.
Yeah, you wouldn't really think about that when you are thinking about basic needs, right? What are some of the surprising kind of findings that you've found, the kind of basic standards of living which have gone unmet?
One of the most striking things for me is the issue with food. Right? If you spoke to most people in Singapore and said that whether Singaporeans need to worry about food, they would say, what are you talking about? Of course, we don't need to worry about food. But we forget that there are many households, right, that are talking about putting food on the table. And that became so apparent, right? The ramping up of food programs and volunteer groups during the COVID-19 crisis. Very important reminder not to take it for granted, that basic needs are met, and to take seriously. I think of this as three reasons why we should care about inequality, regardless of where we stand. The first reason is that unequal societies are intrinsically unfair. Those people doing well can also pass on disadvantages to their next generation and so on. So we talk about that as mobility. It's very tightly linked to inequality. And that means at a practical level that our individual destinies become predetermined by the circumstances we are born into, regardless of what we are good at and how hard we try. The second one is that unequal societies create insecurity. So people at the bottom end often live in persistent anxiety, right, about kind of falling all the way through to the bottom whenever something goes wrong. They know that there is nothing to catch them. But even in the middle of society, the large middle class, there is a lot of anxiety as well, because people will look at what happens at the bottom end and they will worry. The third reason is that inequality is fundamentally divisive. Why do I say that? People who are not doing so well will look at those who are doing well and say, why do you get all the opportunities? And the people who are doing very well will sometimes become quite judgmental and say, well, why don't you work harder? And in unequal societies, you are told that to meet your needs, you need to go out there and try as hard as you can, right, and fend for yourself. And there is also a particular mean streak where the policies that are meant to help people, there is a process of sorting through the people who are seeking help. And in this sorting process, individuals are judged and labeled, right, as either worthy and deserving of help or unworthy and undeserving of help. Right? So inadvertently, right, even when it's not intended to be so, this promotes a very distinct kind of unkindness towards the most vulnerable people in our society.
Yeah, relating to the general elections coming up, what should we pay attention to?
So I only have suggestions that I think I would have appreciated when I was younger. And so the first is that to look at the effects of policies, not just their stated intentions. Right? So to always ask ourselves, have things worked? This means looking beyond headlines, speeches, and big announcements. The second thing is, if you are someone that's looking for change in certain policies, I think first focus on whether the way decisions are made about those policies is changing. One of the most illuminating interventions for me from civil society was an open letter that was written about Emerging Stronger Task Force. This point that if we say that COVID-19 has dramatically changed the way our society and economy will operate in the future, then surely the way we go about thinking about how to emerge from these problems must also change. And yet when you look at the composition of the people selected to think about such an important issue, it does not reflect the cultural and social diversity of our society. It certainly doesn't reflect the interests of people who have been most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, who have been most insecure. And the third thing would be to think about your own values and your vision of the kind of society where you would like to live. Think about a place where you look forward to returning to whenever you travel. A place where you feel confident and optimistic about the future, both for yourself and the people you care about. Think about what that society looks like, and then think about what kind of government will get you there.